Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone. The chandeliers of Montgomery Estate were already glowing like suspended constellations when Evelyn Carter swept the broom across the marble floor. She moved with slow precision, her long arms guiding each stroke as though she were conducting a silent symphony. The ballroom smelled faintly of fresh polish and lilies, a preparation for tomorrow night's gala. Lucas Montgomery stood near the grand staircase, sipping a tumbler of whiskey. His gaze roamed the hall like an artist admiring his own masterpiece. Beside him, Vanessa Delacroix lounged against the banister, draped in a silk shawl the color of fresh cream. Her green eyes narrowed at the sight of Evelyn bending to collect a stray champagne cork from last week's event. "Tell me," Vanessa said in a voice dipped in honey but sharpened at the edges, "does she ever smile?" Lucas smirked. "Evelyn? She's efficient. Doesn't waste time on small talk." "Efficient, yes, but imagine, tomorrow night this room filled with gowns, diamonds, champagne, and her, in the middle of it." Vanessa chuckled, low and deliberate. "It'd be like dropping a fish into a diamond bowl." Lucas's smirk deepened. "Maybe I should invite her." Vanessa's brows arched. "You wouldn't?" "Why not? Could be entertaining." He finished his whiskey in one smooth swallow. From across the room, Evelyn straightened, her hands resting lightly on the broom handle. She wasn't close enough to hear their exact words, but she knew the tone. She'd heard it before. The kind that didn't expect her to belong anywhere but in the background. When Lucas strolled over, his smile was bright enough to blind. "Evelyn," he began, leaning casually against a pillar, "how would you like to attend tomorrow night's gala? All the city's finest will be here. Champagne, music, this is he works." She blinked, her lips parting slightly. "Me?" "Of course." His voice was warm but too smooth, like glass over ice. "You deserve a night off, don't you?" Vanessa lingered in the background, feigning disinterest but watching closely. Evelyn held his gaze for a moment. There was a game being played here, she could feel it, but she wasn't the type to step back from a challenge. "I'll come," she said softly. "Thank you for the invitation." Lucas's brows twitched upward for a fraction of a second, the first crack in his performance. He recovered quickly. "Excellent. It's black tie, of course." "I understand," she replied, and returned to sweeping as if the conversation had ended. Later that night, she sat at her small kitchen table, her son Marcus across from her, his brow furrowed. "You know he's making fun of you, right?" "I know," she said, sipping her tea. "Then why go?" "Because," she murmured, "sometimes the best way to answer a joke is to make the punchline your own." Marcus leaned back, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've got a plan." "Not a plan," Evelyn said, standing to pull a long garment bag from the back of her closet. "A memory." Inside was a deep emerald gown from another lifetime, the one where she sang under warm stage lights, her voice carrying through smoky jazz lounges. She smoothed the fabric, the years melting away beneath her fingers. The next day, the estate buzzed with preparations. Caterers rushed in with silver trays, florists shaped bouquets into perfection. Lucas floated between them like a conductor, Vanessa always a step behind, her laughter a constant accessory. The word had spread among a few choice guests. "The cleaning lady's coming." A ripple of amusement passed through the crowd-to-be. As evening fell, the ballroom shimmered with light, the air scented with roses and expensive perfume. Guests arrived in glittering waves, each one more adorned than the last. Lucas stood at the entrance, greeting names from the social pages, his smile as polished as his cufflinks. And as this story unfolds, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these stories. Post your location and local time in the comments below. A hush passed through the crowd near the door as a tall figure stepped inside. Evelyn Carter, wrapped in the emerald gown like it had been poured onto her, her natural curls pinned back with delicate gold clips, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. She didn't scan the room nervously. She owned each step as if the marble floor had been laid for her alone. Conversations faltered. Glasses paused mid-air. Vanessa's smile froze, sharp as broken glass. Lucas blinked once, quickly, before the smirk returned. But softer, less certain. "Evelyn," he said, stepping forward. "You look unexpected." She smiled, not wide, just enough to show she'd heard the subtext. "So do you," she replied. The night was just beginning. The music swelled from the corner stage, a gentle stream of strings and piano drifting over the hum of conversation. The chandelier's light seemed to catch the emerald of Evelyn's dress, making her the quiet center of gravity in a room that wasn't built for her. Lucas kept his posture relaxed, but his mind was spinning. This wasn't the awkward spectacle he had pictured. She wasn't fumbling, she wasn't overwhelmed, she was radiating something that drew glances from every corner. That wasn't part of the joke. Vanessa, unwilling to let the balance tip, slinked up to Evelyn with a champagne flute in hand. "So," she said, her voice dipped in feigned warmth, "Lucas tells me you're part of the staff here. Must be Sue's. It's a change of pace to see the place all dressed up." Evelyn sipped from her own glass, sparkling water, no bubbles clinging to her lips. "It's lovely," she said evenly. "Though I've always thought the place looked best in the quiet mornings, before anyone else arrives." A couple standing nearby tilted their heads, intrigued by the calm confidence in her tone. Vanessa's smile thinned. "Well, I suppose it's nice to experience this side of things, isn't it?" Evelyn's gaze held steady. "Experience comes in many forms, dear. Some of us just know how to carry it without needing a spotlight." Lucas chuckled under his breath, masking it with a sip of wine. Vanessa heard it, and the faint flush in her cheeks was not from champagne. The applause still lingered like perfume in the air, as Evelyn stepped back toward the edge of the crowd, her hands resting gently against the folds of her gown. She didn't bow, didn't make a show of herself. She simply stood there, letting the music's memory speak for her. Henry Abbott moved through the guests with the steady dignity of a man who knew his place in any room. When he reached her, he took her hand, not with condescension but as though greeting a fellow artist. "You haven't lost it," he said, his voice low but brimming with conviction. "If anything, you've deepened it." Evelyn gave him a small smile. Life tends to do that. Lucas arrived at her side, his smile practiced, but his eyes restless. "Evelyn," he said in that host's tone he reserved for guests he wanted to impress. "That was quite a surprise." "A pleasant one, I hope," she replied, her voice smooth but edged with something sharper. "Of course," Lucas said, but his glance toward Vanessa betrayed a silent conversation. "This isn't the story we planned to tell." Vanessa slipped in between them, her fingers curling around Lucas's arm. "Well, you certainly know how to captivate a crowd." The word captivate landed like a compliment and a warning. "Tell me, do you still sing often, or was this a rare occasion?" "Rare," Evelyn admitted. "These days, my audience is usually a mop and bucket. They don't applaud much." A few nearby guests chuckled warmly, not at her expense, but at the understated wit. Vanessa didn't like the sound of it, laughter that wasn't aimed at Evelyn, but aligned with her. The current of the night began to shift. People who had arrived expecting another polished, predictable gala now gravitated toward Evelyn, introducing themselves, offering compliments. The emerald gown became a moving landmark in the room, drawing conversations toward it. Lucas kept trying to pull the spotlight back, introducing political guests, making toasts, telling charming anecdotes, but the undercurrent kept drifting toward the woman he had intended to humiliate. By the bar, two men in tailored tuxedos whispered, "Who is she again?" "A cleaning lady here," one said. "You're joking." "Does she look like I'm joking?" The second man glanced over at Evelyn, watching the way she spoke to a small group of guests. She wasn't pushing to be heard. People leaned in to catch her words. Vanessa decided to up the ante. She approached Evelyn again, her heels clicking like tiny hammers on the marble. "It must be interesting for you," she said in a voice meant to carry to surrounding ears, seeing the other side of the curtain, all this elegance. Evelyn took a sip of her sparkling water, meeting her gaze. "Elegance isn't in the chandeliers or the gowns, Miss Delacroix. It's in how you treat people when no one's watching." The words landed. Vanessa's lips tightened. A few guests exchanged glances, the kind that said they'd caught the barb. Lucas stepped in quickly, placing a hand on Vanessa's elbow. "Why don't we—" But before he could finish, the large double doors opened, and Marcus Carter walked in. He wasn't dressed like the others, no tux, just a dark suit, crisp shirt, and the quiet authority of a man who didn't need to play by the room's rules. He crossed the floor in long, easy strides until he reached his mother. "Evening," he said, kissing her cheek. Evelyn smiled. "Marcus?" Lucas extended a hand, the host in him kicking in. "And you are?" "Marcus Carter," he said, "Evelyn's son." Something in his tone made Lucas hesitate. There was steel under the politeness. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Well, isn't this unexpected?" Marcus glanced between them, reading the air faster than most would. "Unexpected for you, maybe." He looked around at the surrounding guests. "Funny thing, my mother didn't tell me she'd be singing tonight, probably because the invitation she got wasn't exactly given in good faith." A quiet ripple moved through the nearby cluster of guests. Lucas's jaw tensed, but he kept the smile plastered on. "I assure you." But Marcus wasn't done. "You invited her as a joke, didn't you? Thought it'd be amusing to see the cleaning lady out of uniform?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Gasps. A few people looked directly at Lucas now, their expressions cooling. Vanessa stepped back, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Evelyn placed a hand on Marcus's arm. "That's enough." Her voice was calm, but the room felt taut, like a bowstring drawn back. Lucas chuckled lightly, but it was brittle. "Seems there's been a misunderstanding." Marcus didn't smile. "The only misunderstanding here is how badly you misjudged her." The tension was no longer subtle. The night had shifted again, but this time, not in Lucas's favor. The hum of the crowd had changed. It was no longer the easy, idle murmur of a gala. It was a living thing, tight with curiosity and the faint thrill of seeing a mask slip. Glasses were held mid-air. Conversations had stalled. Lucas Montgomery, master of the controlled room, could feel the grip slipping from his hands. Marcus's words still hung in the air, stubborn as smoke. Evelyn stood between her son and Lucas, her touch on Marcus's sleeve the only thing keeping him from saying more. Her eyes, however, never left Lucas's. Lucas's laugh was smooth but not convincing. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice so it carried, "it seems there's been a bit of confusion. My invitation to Evelyn was nothing but an act of kindness, a chance for someone who works tirelessly to enjoy a fine evening." From the edge of the circle, Vanessa added, "Yes, let's not turn this into something ugly." Evelyn's voice cut in, soft, but with an edge that commanded the room. Ugly doesn't happen all at once. It's in the small things, the tone in a voice, the way an invitation is given so others can watch you stumble, and the hope that you'll be too afraid to walk into the room at all. The crowd shifted, a few heads nodded. Henry Abbott had stepped closer now, his sharp eyes sweeping the faces around him. Lucas tried to retake control. "Now I think we can all agree." But Henry's voice interrupted, calm and steady. "I don't think we all can, Lucas. I remember a time when you prided yourself on spotting talent. It seems you missed it right under your own roof." A ripple of agreement moved through the guests. Lucas's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Henry addressed Evelyn directly. "Miss Carter, would you do me, and perhaps everyone here, the honor of singing one more song?" Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to avoid becoming the evening's entertainment yet again. But then she glanced at Marcus, whose proud gaze told her he saw no humiliation in her voice, only power. She nodded once. "All right." The band readied themselves without a word. Evelyn stepped forward, not hurried, not shy. The emerald fabric of her gown shimmered under the chandeliers. She closed her eyes, or just a moment, long enough to push aside the noise of the room, the weight of the stairs, the sting of why she'd been invited in the first place. And then she began. This time her voice wasn't just beautiful. It was fierce. It carried the ache of years stolen, the weight of work done in silence, the quiet strength of a woman who knew her worth even when others didn't. Each note was deliberate, each pause a choice. People leaned in, some with hands at their throats, others blinking back unexpected tears. Vanessa tried to maintain her usual poise, but her glass trembled slightly in her hand. Lucas didn't move at all. He watched her, the realization dawning that every note was unraveling his control over the evening. When the final note faded, the silence was deeper than before, Then the applause came, louder, longer, almost defiant in its force. Guests rose to their feet, some calling her name. Evelyn inclined her head in quiet acknowledgement, then turned and walked back toward Marcus. Henry was the first to break the new hush. "That," he said to no one in particular, "is what elegance looks like." Lucas felt the words like a stone dropped in water, ripples pushing him further and further from the center of his own gala. The turning point had arrived, and everyone knew it. The ripple of applause still clung to the air as the gala's rhythm shifted completely. It was no longer Lucas Montgomery's party. It was Evelyn Carter's night. Guests moved toward her like petals leaning toward sunlight. Strangers introduced themselves with genuine smiles, asking about her music, her life, her story. The polished conversations about property values and politics had given way to warmer, more human exchanges. Henry Abbott stayed close, fielding questions from those who'd recognized his name. "Yes, she's extraordinary," he told them without hesitation. "I told her once she had a voice that could change a room. Seems I underestimated her. It changes more than that." Across the hall, Lucas poured himself another drink he didn't need. He sipped it with the stiff posture of a man trying not to watch what everyone else was watching. Vanessa stood beside him, though her usual composure was fraying. "They're acting like she's the guest of honor," she hissed. "She's a novelty," Lucas muttered. "It'll fade." But it didn't fade. It deepened. One couple, wealthy art patrons, asked Evelyn if she'd ever considered performing again. A restaurateur from the city's cultural district offered to host a small showcase for her. Even a local news anchor approached, slipping her a card with a hopeful smile. Vanessa couldn't stand it. She approached Evelyn yet again, this time in front of an eager circle of listeners. "Well, you certainly have everyone charmed," she said, smiling wide enough to show teeth. "I'm sure it's quite different from your day-to-day. Must be a nice escape." Evelyn met her gaze calmly. "I'm not escaping anything. I'm just bringing who I am into the room. The difference is, tonight, the room decided to notice." The response was met with murmurs of approval. Vanessa's smile faltered, the edge of her control slipping. Lucas, sensing the room's loyalty tilting further away, raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, "let's remember this is a night for celebration, of all kinds. Let's toast to finding beauty in unexpected places." It was meant to sound generous, but the phrasing landed wrong. Unexpected places made it sound like Evelyn's presence was still a surprise, rather than a rightful seat at the table. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain. Marcus, standing just behind his mother, took a step forward. "Beauty doesn't need to be found, Mr. Montgomery. It was always here. Some people just chose not to see it." The air in the room tightened. Lucas's smile froze, but his eyes gave him away. Sads, harp, cornered, calculating. Henry Abbott stepped into the silence. "Marcus is right. I've been in this city a long time. I've seen galas come and go, fortunes rise and fall. But I haven't often seen someone walk into a room like this, after the way she was invited, and carry herself with this kind of grace. That's not beauty you stumble upon, that's character, and character doesn't fade." The applause this time was louder, unprompted, and fully for Evelyn. Guests turned toward her again, raising their glasses. From his place by the bar, Lucas realized the tide had completely shifted. This was no longer a polite curiosity. It was a collective choice. The people in his ballroom had decided who they admired tonight, and it wasn't him. And for the first time in years, Lucas Montgomery didn't know how to win the room back. By the time the string quartet began its final set, the gala no longer resembled the event Lucas had planned. Evelyn stood in the center of an easy conversation with 3 city council members, the restaurateur, and a young art student who looked at her like she'd stepped out of a dream. She wasn't performing now, no song, no stage, just speaking, and yet she still held the room. Her voice was soft, measured, with that same hint of melody, as if every sentence carried its own rhythm. Henry Abbott stayed close, not to shield her, but to enjoy watching her navigate this new terrain with the kind of poise even seasoned politicians struggled to master. He'd been to hundreds of these nights, but this was the first where the most powerful man in the room was no longer the host. Across the hall, Lucas leaned against a marble pillar, jaw tight. He'd stopped trying to insert himself into conversations. Each attempt only seemed to push people further toward Evelyn. Vanessa lingered beside him, but her posture had stiffened into something brittle. They're eating it up, she whispered. She's not even one of us. Lucas turned his gaze on her, slow and cold. Then maybe us doesn't mean what it used to. The words surprised even him, and Vanessa caught the sting of them. But Lucas wasn't thinking about her. He was calculating. The Montgomery name had been currency in this city for decades. But tonight, in his own ballroom, a hotel maid had done what he couldn't. Made people believe. Marcus crossed the room to his mother, slipping a hand into hers. His eyes were bright, not with pride alone, but with something deeper. Vindication. You were amazing tonight, he murmured. Not because you sang, but because you stayed exactly who you are. Evelyn squeezed his hand. And you stood up when it counted, I noticed. Before either could say more, the elderly councilman Evelyn had been speaking with earlier cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice formal but warm. If you ever find yourself with time beyond the hotel, I'd like to introduce you to some people at our cultural committee. We could use someone who sees the world the way you do. The offer hung in the air like a promise. Vanessa's head snapped toward them, her expression unreadable. Lucas's mouth pressed into a thin line. Evelyn thanked him graciously, not committing, but not declining. She understood something important now. She didn't have to chase their world. If she wanted to, she could step into it on her own terms. The night wound down with polite farewells and lingering glances in Evelyn's direction. When she finally stepped outside into the cool night air, Henry was waiting. Care for a ride home? He asked. Evelyn smiled. Thank you, but I'd like to walk. Feels right to leave the night on my own 2 feet. Marcus walked beside her as they made their way down the quiet street. The golden glow of the gala's windows receded behind them, and the city's hum returned. You know, Marcus said, you didn't just walk into their room tonight, you took it with you when you left. Evelyn's laugh widens, as soft, almost incredulous. But as they turned the corner toward their neighborhood, she realized he was right. Some doors don't need to be opened again, because you've already stepped beyond them. And Lucas Montgomery? He was still standing inside, wondering how the world had shifted while he wasn't looking. The city's morning paper didn't often run gala stories above the fold, but this one was different. The headline read, Hotel Maid Steals the Spotlight at Montgomery Gala. Beneath it, a photo caught Evelyn mid-laugh, head tilted slightly toward the councilman, the string lights overhead turning her dark hair into a crown of gold. The caption named her, noted her job at the Montgomery Hotel, and, pointedly, praised her grace and unaffected charm, in a room known for guarded smiles and political undercurrents. By noon, social media had taken it further. Snippets of her impromptu Dutch conversation with Henry had gone viral, tagged with hashtag Made in the Spotlight and hashtag Evelyn Carter moment. Even people who hadn't been at the gala were reposting the clip of her song, marveling at how the room had gone still. For Lucas Montgomery, the fallout was immediate. 3 business partners called to postpone meetings. The restaurateur who had snubbed Evelyn publicly posted a photo with her captioned, True class needs no invitation. And the hotel's board, many of whom had read the paper, quietly began questioning whether Lucas's instincts were as sharp as they'd believed. Vanessa fared no better. Whispers of her dismissive comments toward Evelyn had slipped into the same gossip channels that once protected her. By contrast, Henry Abbott seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. At his morning coffee meeting with a local journalist, he spoke warmly of Evelyn, her work ethic, and her integrity. He didn't have to say Lucas's name, the contrast was implied. Meanwhile, Evelyn returned to the hotel as if nothing had changed. She folded sheets, polished brass rails, and checked the corners of the guest lounge for forgotten scarves. But she noticed the difference in how people looked at her now. Guests smiled longer, staff members gave her little nods, and even the general manager seemed suddenly aware of her presence. Late in the afternoon, as she was finishing her shift, a courier arrived with a thick envelope. Inside was a formal letter from the city's cultural committee, inviting her to join their next planning meeting as an honorary member. Marcus read it twice, grinning. This is big, Mom, you could... Evelyn cut him off with a small shake of her head. I could, she said, but I don't want to trade one kind of expectation for another. If I go, it will be because I have something worth saying, not because I'm the novelty of the week. That night, she sat on the porch, the summer air warm against her skin, and thought about how quickly a moment could change the shape of a life. She didn't want fame, not really. But she did want voice, and now she had it. Across town, Lucas sat in his study, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. Each article, each comment thread, felt like a quiet indictment. He had underestimated her, dismissed her, and in doing so, had given her the stage, and she had taken it without asking. For the first time in years, Lucas wasn't sure how to regain control. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about him anymore. The world had shifted, yes, but she wasn't chasing it. She was simply ready, if it came again, to meet it standing tall. Evelyn moved on before Vanessa could respond, weaving through the glittering clusters of conversation. She carried herself like she belonged, which unsettled the very people who had decided she didn't. From across the room, a man in his 60s watched her closely. Henry. Abbott had been to hundreds of galas, seen thousands of faces, but something about her tugged at his memory. Lucas intercepted him. "Enjoying the evening, Henry?" Henry murmured, eyes still following Evelyn. "You didn't tell me you had royalty on the guest list." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Royalty?" Henry smiled faintly. "You'll see." Meanwhile, the whispers were spreading. A pair of women near the dessert table murmured about Evelyn's dress. Someone else commented on her poise, then asked, "Do you think she's somebody?" Vanessa caught the tone shift and decided to turn it back. She approached Evelyn again, this time with an audience. "So tell me, Evelyn, what's it like cleaning up after a night like this? Must be such a contrast to, well, tonight." A couple of chuckles from nearby ears. Evelyn didn't flinch. "It is," she said, her voice velvet smooth. "Cleaning up after people tells you a lot about them. Who leaves a mess? Who puts things back in place? Who hides the broken glass under the tablecloth?" Her eyes met Vanessa's on that last line, and the chuckles died out. Lucas's smirk flickered. There was a sting in that one. Before Vanessa could press further, the music shifted. The band began a low, sultry number, and Henry Abbott stepped forward, speaking just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Miss Carter, isn't it? Forgive me, but I could swear I've heard your voice before." Evelyn blinked. "I doubt it. It's been years." "You sang," Henry said, "didn't you? A little club off Grant Street. Blue velvet curtains. You sang Stardust and made the whole place go still." A few guests turned to listen. Lucas raised an eyebrow, glancing between them. Evelyn's smile was small, almost wistful. "That was a long time ago." Henry looked at the band. "Would you indulge us?" Lucas's lips curved in a way that said he was already anticipating the awkwardness. "Oh, that's an idea. Evelyn, the floor is yours." Vanessa's eyes gleamed. She wanted to watch her falter. The crowd shifted, making a loose circle, curiosity sparking in the air. Evelyn stood in the center, her hands clasped lightly before her. She didn't rush. She let the silence settle. And then, in a voice warm and aching with history, she began to sing. The first note cut through the chatter like a thread of light. Her tone was rich, velvety, the kind that wrapped around you and pulled you in close. The band followed her lead instinctively, the pianist leaning in as though afraid to disturb her phrasing. People stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Lucas found himself frozen, the glass in his hand forgotten. Vanessa's smile faded completely, replaced by something unreadable. When Evelyn finished, there was no applause at first, just silence, heavy and golden. Then the room erupted, a swell of clapping, some even standing. Henry was grinning like a man who had just found treasure. Lucas clapped too, but his eyes were calculating. This wasn't going how he'd planned at all.